Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Talk Junkies, where tonight's going to be a very interesting night, as it is each and every single week here at Talk Junkies. Last week, Johnny and I hit it off, had a very interesting conversation about inflation and our thoughts on that with the 1%, and we got into a little bit of just wage, or what is a living wage, automation with jobs, stuff like that. And we kind of gave, what we would do in that situation and what we think should happen. Not saying that it's right. Tune in last week's podcast and tell us what you think. But anywho, we got a guest on this evening. It's been a while since we've had this guest on. He's been on multiple times. He's written multiple books. It's always a pleasure to have this gentleman on Talk Junkies. He's one of the OG3 to ever even be, he was one of the very first guests we ever had on Talk Junkies. But anyhow, Mike Anderson, how you doing, sir? Thanks again for joining.
Great. Thanks for inviting me back. It's a pleasure.
Things in Ohio are well?
Yes.
Very nice.
Getting to be spring.
Beautiful thing.
It's about time.
Yep. Yeah. Are you currently writing right now, or still?
Yeah.
And you're still doing
editing book 4.
Very nice. So publish date soon?
Mid-year.
Mid-year. Okay.
Very nice.
What is, I don't know if you can say it, what is book 4 called again?
It's called Twilight of the American Experiment. Subtitle, Without Moral Balance, the Republic will fall.
Okay.
Very interesting.
Meaning,
It's a mouthful.
we can't have tribalism and one point of view dominating. We have to work together for the sake of the country, basically.
Gotcha. Which I agree with 100%.
Absolutely.
I'm actually very excited that you were one of our first guests, because you kind of built the foundation, for me at least, on understanding what's actually happening within our society right now with tribalism and just the way that it all works. So I'm very thankful to have met you, Mike. And again, it's just putting the pieces together and trying to understand how we all get along. So I'm excited for this 4th book that you have coming, man. We'll definitely have you on, and we'll talk about that when that day comes. But I know you want to get into something a little bit different tonight. It no longer seems, COVID's kind of went to the wayside, in my opinion. You don't really hear about it much anymore. I know in China it's still pretty aggressive. People are still getting locked down.
Supposedly, there's more cases than there were at the offset. Like, China just a couple of weeks ago hit their highest record total for cases ever in a certain amount of time. Whatever. The cases were higher than they ever were in the past for a certain given point of period of time.
Yeah. So hopefully that doesn't happen here in the States. But anywho, it seems as if this war with Russia and Ukraine is kind of taking over all mainstream media outlets, YouTube, any social media platform. This is kind of what's taken over, TikTok, all that stuff, man. You want to get into that tonight. So kind of shed a little bit of light. I'm not entirely too sure. I should know these things, but I don't know really what's going on and why it's happening.
Okay. Well, basically, the bottom line is that Russia attacked Ukraine. One of the reasons for that is Ukraine is a democracy. It's a former Soviet republic. And so when the Soviet Union fell in 1990, several components of it became separate countries. And they were countries before the Soviet Union, or were part of old Russia. But like the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania were separate countries. Then they became part of the Soviet Union. Then when that collapsed, they became separate countries again. They're part of NATO, which is very key to understand, because NATO is a very unified military counterbalance to the old Soviet Union. So, but Ukraine, I don't think was ever on its own. But when the Soviet Union collapsed, it has an ethnic population that is not Russian. They speak Russian, I'm sure, but it's not Russian. So they formed a democracy, and they've been a democracy since 1990, and not part of NATO, but sort of in a buffer zone between Russia and Western Europe. So, but part of this has to do with Putin's change in behavior. He rose to power in the late 1990s when the remnants of the old Soviet Union started to reconstitute itself. And it adopted a Western psychology and economic policy and stuff, and improved its relationships with the West and all that. But it's gone through several stages since the late 1990s. And the latest one is paranoia, feeling that the West is too powerful and getting too close and wants to take over Russia, which it doesn't, but that's the feeling there. So it does not, Russia does not like the idea of Ukraine being a democracy that close next to it. And so they've basically whittled away at Ukraine for the past, let's see, 7 years. 7 years ago, they attacked the Crimea, which is Ukrainian territory, and took it over. Then in the last 3 years, they took over part of eastern Ukraine, the Chechen region, which has, you may have heard of the Chechen rebels. They're native ethnic group that live in that part of Ukraine who want to be part of Russia. So they revolted, and Russia is now occupying part of that. So it's dividing Ukraine into pieces over 7 years and now attacking it to destroy it, basically. I'm interested in your guys' feeling about it, and not from, when we were talking earlier, you said you don't know a lot about it. I'm not really interested in what you know about it. I'm interested in your reaction to it, because it's been decades since there's been a war like this. And I want your reaction to bombing hospitals, bombing schools, bombing kindergartens, killing civilians, which is, the worst thing that human beings can do. And now it's all on TV. So there was never, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or any other kind of media coverage to a war like this. And, you mentioned tribalism. I think this is really, I said in my tribalism book, the last chapter is what could end tribalism. One of the things that could end it is America becoming more united. And this is really something that has united, and it's very early to say that the country is united. Obviously, there's a lot of tribalism still, but there's elements that both sides share in dealing with this war. I mean, the corporations putting sanctions on Russia, pulling their businesses out. A lot of those corporations are left-leaning. They're progressive or woke or whatever, but they're doing what a conservative would do or would agree with. So, I don't think there are many people who favor genocide and murder of innocent people. And so that's a uniting factor. The other thing I would say about it that is interesting is it puts life in perspective. There's all these conversations about various minority groups and disadvantaged groups and stuff like that, and defund the police, all these things that you've read about. But when it comes down to it, those are maybe things that are unfair, and maybe there's some bigotry. I mean, there definitely is some racism in the country. I don't think the whole country is racist, but there is some. But when you look at living versus dying, those things get real and are more important. So it's fortunate for all of us that Europe and the United States and most democracies are united against Russia, because everybody agrees that it's evil and it should be stopped as quickly as possible. So I see a consensus across the country about that one issue, which is something that both sides have in common.
No, absolutely. That was my initial reaction to first seeing it. Is this is ridiculous. Like, human beings harming other human beings is just a terrible thing. So to see that going on, I'm like, this is not okay. Like, my initial thought was, how much greed and power does Putin need? And it's immediate hatred towards Putin, which I'm sure that there's other people involved, but he's like the face of this whole thing. He can't be the only person involved in the whole thing, but he's the face of it. And all this hatred to being like, how much do you need? And also knowing the background on Putin a little bit, from watching various documentaries and stuff like that, he's not a good guy. He's a dictator. Even though technically not a dictator, because he's been, the corrupt elections and everything that he's had. And also just knowing even before this happened with Ukraine, knowing how much the Russians hate their leader and that they had no say in it. So it's just all around just frustration of what's going on, and it's a terrible thing. And just for me as an individual, like, why do you need to do this? Like, what's any kind of purpose? Like, why do you need to gain so much power? Why are you harming other people who are freely doing, what they want to do, have their democracy, do this? Why do you have to come in and be an asshole, basically? That was my initial thought to the whole thing, and that it's terrible. And man, I don't know if it's super media driven or whatever, but it's very much like also the other things, like they're not just attacking military. It's very much like what you were talking about.
Civilians, like, and all kinds of
civilians, like girls getting raped. There's all these things coming out. It's a total. It's terrible.
War.
It's like, yeah, it's war at its worst that's happening over there. It's not just military people dying. It's everyday people. You see the pictures with mothers with some kind of AK on their back with a clip, and then they have the yellow band around their arm carrying their children, to places, and people being separated from their families because of this. And it's it's an awful, terrible thing. That's my reaction to it. Is that
my initial gut reaction was, and I'm not a big.
Oh, hold on.
Oh, whoa,
Mike, you still there? Hello.
Oh, I think we lost Mike.
Oh man,
that's cool. Well, I'll save it. We'll just get him back on. Yeah. Well, I don't want to. I don't want to just have down airtime, but I also don't want to talk about what I'm going to say because it's a response to Mike. So yeah.
Yeah, and I don't want to fill it with anything because this is actually very serious.
Yeah. I have one thing I would say, which is I disagree, and I would tell Mike this too. I disagree a tiny bit, small amount, with what he said about, like, putting into perspective the struggles that people are dealing with over here. For example, the bigotry and racism and the class war and a whole bunch of that kind of stuff. Because I don't think that it's okay to ignore one evil because a greater evil is happening.
Okay.
I don't think, in my personal opinion, it's not okay to be like, I don't think it's ever okay to be like, you don't have it as, and I don't think he meant it that way. But I just want to clarify.
More of a uniting thing, and as far as tribalism goes, he was like, man, this is really gonna.
But he said that he said that it, man, it was something he said at the beginning about it, like putting it in perspective or something like that. And I disagree with that as far as, yes, obviously people dying is way worse than what's happening over here. But I think that when you compare things like that, there's always a greater evil. It's like taking someone with like going through a divorce or depression or some shit and saying, look, you don't have it as bad because you still have both your arms. Like you can't, just because someone doesn't have it as bad as someone else doesn't mean their problems aren't still important. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So obviously everything that's happening in Ukraine and Russia, absolutely terrible, absolutely god awful. But I don't think it gives us the right to just ignore. Okay. But now, Phil, okay. You back? What's up?
Yep.
Okay.
I don't know what happened there. I don't know if was my internet connection. Not sure.
It happens.
We'll put the blame on you, Mike. Yeah,
we'll put the blame on you.
Yeah.
No. So my initial gut reaction was, and I'm not a big proponent of sending out the U.S. military to every little thing. I think that it's kind of crazy, in my opinion. I think that it's kind of crazy that we're in like 2/3 or a little over 2/3 of the world's countries, that we have troops stationed there all the time and stuff like that's kind of nuts to me. It's insane. I think that it's not our job to police the world, and I think we get involved in too much. But at the same time, that being said, I think it's crazy. It's crazy to me that we haven't gotten involved. And some people are saying, oh, it's because they're not a part of NATO. When, I mean, like, Ukraine's been trying, as far as I've heard, to be a part of NATO. I don't know all the details. I'm not well educated on enough. I don't know why they're not a part. But I feel like they've been trying to be a part of NATO. And regardless of whether they are a part of NATO or not, isn't it the, not even socially responsible, isn't it the, like, the humanitarian responsible thing to assist in situations like these? For example, like World War II, just all these different things. There's so many different things where I'm like, it's kind of your human responsibility that if you have the ability to assist.
Doesn't America have a really good track record of only getting to wars whenever it's like
when it benefits us?
Yeah,
when it benefits us.
Anyway, I'll leave that.
Or
so
we
that
get
was
attacked. Japan attacked us, and that started World War II.
Well, yeah,
okay.
Yeah, but I mean, not just that though. I mean, just I think it's weird that we don't, like I said, I'm one of the first people who is against us getting involved in most things that we get involved in. I truly am. I think we get involved in too much. But I'm like, this is one of those things that if everything they're saying is true, once again, not well educated on the subject, but if everything that I'm hearing is true, then why aren't we? Because this is something where we should be.
Because I think that would trigger World War III. I mean,
but once again, there's a certain, there's that certain aspect of, is the fear of repercussion too much to, like, if you're letting the fear of repercussion affect your ability to be humanitarian or to give a shit about other people, then that's shitty on you. If that makes any, did I word that right? Like, does that make, like, if you're scared to get involved because of the retaliation and because you want stuff to be okay with where you're at, when there are terrible, terrible, terrible things happening to other people, then that says a lot about you too. I get that there's that survival instinct, not just on a person, but as a country. We don't want World War III. We don't want nukes. We don't want all this. But that whole, oh, we don't negotiate with terrorist attitude at the same time, like, it's the same thing where we don't negotiate, where, man, like, if bad stuff is happening, you help, regardless of what the fallback might be on you.
Well, we're trying to help, but it's a very fine line to walk. I mean,
well, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's easy.
NATO has a article called Article 5 that says if one is attacked, all will defend.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody attacked, if Russia attacked Estonia or Poland, all of NATO would respond and attack back, retaliate. Okay, but we're short of that because Ukraine isn't in NATO, and so there's a very fine line to walk.
But, man, that feels like such a cop-out to me. Sorry to interrupt you. That just feels like such a cop-out that just because they're not, we're like, no, we can't do it.
Well, we don't know Putin's mental state, and he has nukes. Yeah. So, I mean, you got to be very careful there. We're the only country that ever used nukes in war. And those 2 bombs we dropped on Japan that ended World War II scared the hell out of the world. And those were puny bombs compared to what they have now.
Oh, yeah.
So no one has wanted to start a chain reaction that causes nukes to fly, toward us and toward the Soviet Union. So, but if we were fighting a non-nuclear country, if Russia attacked, let's say, Ukraine attacked Poland. Ukraine doesn't have nukes. Then we might be more active because the ante is not raised to the point of using nukes, really. The other comment that's relevant here is we've been trying to develop Ukraine as an ally, but their government is very corrupt. And so it has been historically. And so there's all this stuff about, Obama didn't give him any weapons or Trump didn't give him any weapons or whatever and all that, and fighting back and forth between the left and right about that. But I understand that part of the reason Obama didn't give weapons is because they said, if you clean the country up, we'll give you weapons. So they didn't clean it up. And I'm not saying that it's either completely as corrupt as it was or cleaned up or anything. I'm just saying that that was an issue to us because we wanted a tit for tat. You know, we'll help you economically, we'll help you protect yourself, but you got to, you know, run a democracy that's fair for the people. So,
Do you think you could name a government today that's free of corruption?
no, there isn't one.
See, that's
Well,
yeah,
and
that's
like-
kind of where I'm at, where I'm like,
When Obama,
man.
I do understand. I
everything's-
do understand the nuclear tightrope, though, that you're walking. I agree with that. That thin line there that you want to be careful to cross. Like, I understand that aspect of it. The whole Ukraine not making it in because they didn't do exactly what we want, clean up and all that. I'm like, that's so insanely, like from our country, so insanely like hypocritical. You know, that I'm like, I don't know about all that.
Well, but we're sending him everything we got. That is the reason we didn't send him more stuff before,
Gotcha.
because the deal was help, you know, clean yourself up and we'll protect you basically. And so here we are, unfortunately. But nobody I mean, the other thing about Putin is he's a master manipulator. I mean, he's an ex-KGB big shot. And so he knows how to threaten people. He's a bully. But when a bully is threatening you, at what point do you call him on it? Do you call him on it by, you know, putting a no-fly zone in Ukraine and risking shooting down Russian jets and starting World War III? So will he not do that? On the other hand, he's bombing hospitals and killing innocent people. So if you do that, wouldn't you launch a nuke maybe? I mean, it's a scary scenario where you're not dealing with a person that you can understand. You know, most people, if you're, you know, arguing with them, if it's a leader of another country and you disagree, like China or whatever, whoever it might be, you can set ground rules for the disagreement. Okay, we don't like China stealing our intellectual property, or we don't like this or that or the other thing, but you can lay out the rules and say, here are the ways we agree and here are the ways we disagree. With Putin, there isn't anything like that. I mean, there's no stable set of principles that you can work on together to try and improve. I mean, he feels that Russia is being encroached upon by the West with the idea of taking over Russia. And that's a historical Russian philosophy.
so
And we don't understand it because we know we're not trying to take it over, but they don't understand it.
So I'm just curious, though, and this is just a little bit of my thoughts, but a question: when we did drop the bombs in Hiroshima and those two nuclear bombs or whatever, I don't think that in that moment the United States really had any intentions of not killing innocent civilian people at that time.
No, they knew they killed people. The only
Yeah.
reason they dropped those bombs, Paul, is to make the war end faster.
But
Because
what,
they
It ended up
knew-
saving lives. You're talking
what-
about
but-
ending up
but what-
saving lives.
The
in
greater
end.
evil kind of
but,
thing.
but still innocent.
It's still terrible, but
innocent people died, hospitals, children, schools,
Yeah.
what have you. I think the ultimate problem is that at time of war, and it seems like with the human population, there will always be war, no matter what. I know we've debated here on the podcast what a World War III would look like and whether that would be more of a technological war as opposed to boots on the ground, people dying type of thing. But you're seeing this, and you're seeing innocent people die in a time of war. That always seems to be the common thing. And you think we would get past it, but us being humans, we really don't, and we just continue to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. I'm not defending what they're doing, but this is just what happens in war, and it's unfortunate. And I'm with you, Mike. It's good to see people on the left and right come together in the United States on this. But again, I'm with Johnny too. It's just like we can't butt into everyone's problems. Like, we obviously have interest in Ukraine. I'd be curious to know if it's oil or what have you. I know we've tried to help them build a democracy, but at what cost? You had Joe Biden there when Obama was president, and he had the quid pro quo. I know I'm not saying that right.
There you are.
Where he was threatening them and all that other stuff. So what's the true interest that we have in Ukraine? And these are all questions that are beyond my head. And it's just unfortunate that poor civilians or middle-class civilians or even people who have money there are feeling the repercussions of men who are in war with each other. And these people don't want any part of it.
The thing that I think makes this difference is they were attacked for no reason. They were attacked because Russia was...
Why did we go to Afghanistan?
Huh?
Why did we go to Afghanistan? Weapons, or Iraq? Weapons of mass destruction.
Well,
all
it was
over town?
9/11. That was 9/11.
Well, which
Unless you're talking about Desert Storm
no,
with
I'm
Bill
talking
Clinton's
about.
administration.
I'm talking about when Bush said we invaded Iraq because they had weapons of mass destruction,
Right.
and they went in there. They didn't find any because we had other interests. So we went there for no reason. We went into their country. We invaded it.
That's going on a little different path.
No, I'm saying he's saying that they feel attacked for no reason. We went into. Am I right in saying
Well,
Iraq?
Paul makes a valid point.
It was,
Yeah, no.
we went in there because they had oil or poppy fields or what have you. You know what I'm saying? Like, we did the same thing.
So what you're saying is you think that you're comparing the exact same thing. So it's equal. America going to the Middle East and Afghanistan is the same thing as what Putin's doing, Russia's doing with the Ukraine.
And again, I haven't really looked into it, but based on the conversation that we're having, it just feels very similar.
I'd actually agree with you.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, but the one thing that's different is there are two layers of war. There's fighting between armies, and then there's civilian casualties. And there's a difference between bombing military institutions and bombing hospitals.
There were
It's
some instances.
different.
There were some instances where the United States, with drone footage, killed some innocent people. Granted, it was on
I don't think we ever
accident,
targeted like hospitals or anything.
for
though,
sure. But granted, it may have been an accident. But there are videos out there where innocent
Yeah.
people have died.
Which is,
Well,
collateral damage.
So we have-
yeah. Unfortunately, there's collateral damage in war. No doubt about it in every war. But this appears to be a purposeful effort to to terrorize and destroy the civilian population to get Ukraine to surrender. That's what it feels like.
No,
And you think this is all out of Putin being basically afraid of change? The fact that like I'm a believer in like democracy and being able to vote in leaders and having a place in society, like everybody's vote matters and everything. And it's his fear of being taken out of power, basically, that he needed to act first.
Or he's defending his country's interests because he feels that Russia is under basically economic attack and whatever.
My big
Or
thing
feels
is,
that Ukraine is potentially still
I always think
a
it's
part of.
Yeah.
Like he feels like they didn't have the right to leave. That Ukraine belongs to Russia. Like if California or Texas were to secede from us, and then 10 years later we're like, no, you're still a part of us. Just because it went well for you at the time, because you revolted and you got away, we still own you.
this is my question here. Is it really Russia's best interest to be doing this, or is it in Putin's best interest to be doing this? That's two very
Putin's-
separate things.
Well, it's in Putin's because you probably read they passed a law 2 weeks ago in Russia that if you say anything against the government, you go to jail for 15 years.
Yeah.
Jesus.
So they've
I've seen a bunch of
completely-
videos on that.
Which they were already doing
There
anyways.
was a girl that was making a joke about it that I saw online that was holding up a sign that had no words on it, and she got arrested just because you don't even need words written on anything because you know what you're talking about, and it's almost
Every-
like laughable how terrible it is.
Every objective journalist is leaving Russia because you can't afford to write your columns or your stories. You go to jail. So they're suppressing all dissent. And so 100% of what the Russian population hears over the media is the party line. So since there is no dissent, what they hear is that Ukraine attacked them. So they entered Ukraine to protect themselves.
So where are we at?
I mean-
where are we at right now? It's been a few weeks into it now, and I know that they have invaded a few of the cities. How successful is Russia in taking over Ukraine right now? And I don't mean successful in a good way. Sorry, in their terms. Where are we at?
No, we all knew what you meant. That didn't sound bad or anything.
They have very large number of soldiers there, 150 to 175,000. It's a very large army, much bigger than Ukraine. But Ukraine is putting up a good fight because it's their home country, their democracy, and they're willing to fight for their lives to protect it.
Which is what happens most of the time with any kind of like we talked about it even with Afghanistan with like insurgents or whatever. It is hard to invade any country because at that point you have made not only the military against you, but every citizen. It's different when the war's overseas, but when the war comes home, now every citizen is also a soldier. So you're not fighting the army, you're fighting the country, like every citizen, which sucks, but is what it is.
And there's been a lot of talk about that. I mentioned 175,000. If you had 175,000 man army, you couldn't even control Kiev, which is the capital, because there would be an urban insurgency with snipers in every window picking off Russian soldiers. The 175,000 isn't enough. It's a city of 4 million. That's Chicago.
The best. Yeah, no, that's perfect. Chicago. The best way to look at it is if Russia invaded New York or Kansas City or if they invaded the entire East Coast, do you think that the citizens on the East Coast, sure, you would have some leave, you would have some give up, but do you think that every citizen's just going to be like, no, I don't want to be involved? No, they're trying to protect their home. Like us here in America, you would have
some people get offended, and you go, "No, you're not going to do this."
Exactly. You would have, like he just said, you'd have snipers in windows. You'd have people living in a house just like this, barricaded and ready to go, ready to fight back.
Now, just as a quick side note, I hope as far as like all the gun laws talk and taking away people's guns thing, I hope that this registers pretty clearly to American citizens about whether or not their gun should be taken away. Being able to arm yourself and defend yourself from foreign and domestic enemies. Anyway, that's just a little side note.
No two-way talks are happening right now. I'll tell you
that I've thought about as far as you want to take away people's guns. You see what's happening over there. Anyway, just a little side note that I've thought about. Probably shouldn't disarm the people.
I wanted to ask about my bad.
No, you're good. I'm actually.
I wanted to ask about what is the situation right now with because we just talked about that there are definitely citizens fighting back. But at the same time, there are citizens either surrendering or leaving or fleeing or whatever. What is oh my God, I just had the word in my head and I can't think of it now. What is it called? What is the refugee situation right now? Are there countries around Ukraine taking any Ukrainian refugees?
Yeah.
Okay.
There have been 2.5 million Ukrainians have escaped to other countries. 1.5 million of the 2.5 million went to Poland.
Okay.
And then the other million went to a variety of countries, Hungary, Romania, and the countries that border on Ukraine.
Gotcha.
So they went west and crossed the border, and now they're being cared for.
And I was going to say, and these countries are taking them in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. No, that's good. That's good. I was curious. I didn't know the whole that situation.
So to me, I don't know. And that's just kind of where it's weird for me. If Putin's only going to send in 175,000 troops and it's a population of 4 million, 2 million have left, there's still 2 million people there. It's a big territory.
There's 43 million people that live there.
Oh, 43 million, sorry.
4 million live in Kiev.
Oh, Kiev, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
To me, that doesn't really seem like, I feel like he would have a better type of war plan as opposed to just sending in a
Well, there's probably way more than 175,000 troops too.
Yeah, no, I get it. I
don't know. We're pretty good with our satellites estimating.
Currently, I'm saying in reserves though.
So
there's been a lot of talk about that the Russians were not prepared. They thought it would be very easy, and they thought they'd be welcomed with open arms by the Ukrainians. Hey, we're happy to have you here.
Oh, well, I hope that's the case. I hope they were incredibly underprepared.
Well,
I hope that's
they
true.
Talk about the fact, the tanks, some of the tanks and other equipment hadn't been used for years because they've been not spending money on keeping the military updated.
I saw videos of Ukrainian farmers dragging off broken tanks, literally dragging off broken Russian tanks.
They're technically ranked now as far as military power, just the farmers, right, of the Ukraine, because
maybe
of
I don't
the
know.
amount of tanks. That might have been a meme.
There was a Russian tank for sale on eBay for $240 million that somebody stole or something.
Nice. More props to him. Fight back.
Yeah.
You should fight back.
No, and I think that's the big question everybody's got to ask themselves. How would you feel if somebody just came in and was like, "No, this used to be ours, and we're gonna like come into your homeland"? And
We've all seen
And do
Red
that.
Dawn, and even if not the original, then
I
the new
haven't
one.
seen that movie actually. My bad.
I like it.
Yeah, the whole, I
I've
mean,
seen
Russia
those
or North. I think in the new one they changed it because once again, we didn't want to piss off Russia. So in the reimagining that came out in 2012 or 2008 or whenever the fuck it was, I'm bad with time, but the reimagining, it was supposed to be Russian, and like last minute they changed it all to North Korean. So it was supposed to be Russia invading the U.S. and they changed it to North Korea invading the U.S. because we didn't want to piss off Russia.
Can I get?
Or remember me mentioning earlier how Putin has gone through 2 or 3. He's evolved 2 or 3 times since he took over. And the period before 2008 was the be friends with the West, be like the West, improve your economy, the lifestyle rate, build a middle class in Russia and all that stuff. But then when the Great Recession came in 2008, the Russian economy totally collapsed. So they lost the ability to seek that goal. And so Putin did an about face and started looking at, well, if we can't be part of the West, let's rebuild the Soviet Union. So that's fundamental to understanding this, him taking a different philosophy, and then him looking at the former Soviet republics. Gee, they're being separate is not legitimate. They were part of us for all this time, and they should be part of us again. And in order for Russia to recover its powerful status that it had before it collapsed in 1990, we need to get those countries back as part of us.
That's probably the best way to put it, honestly. Like when we were asking earlier, like, why is it being done? What is Putin thinking? That's probably the best answer right there is that, hey, rebuild our way of lifestyle, rebuild the USSR, whatever, and like, let's reabsorb these countries. And like you said, it sounds like they kind of thought that it'd be welcomed with open arms because they're like, hey, life's not good for you guys in Ukraine, right? Well, join on back up, like, let's do this. Let's unite and be the USSR again or something like that.
That's not how you go about.
No, I know. I'm not saying that's how you
ways to
go
join
about
you.
doing it.
But
Yeah, what they didn't understand is that if you give people freedom, they don't want to give it up.
Yeah.
Not once you give them that. So
goddamn right.
I don't know, I'd be interested to know. I mean, just I've seen a lot of videos. It's just obviously flooding the internet and stuff. It's stuff in that
so
nature.
hard to know what's real and what's not real too.
Exactly, because we all know that you necessarily can't trust the mainstream media for what we watch. Whatever 6 major news corporations you see, and not even that, just people on YouTube. You're getting all these videos, all these TikToks. I mean, it's not just Russia. The shit that's going on in China, like we brought up earlier. There's so many videos, and you just don't really know. I mean, like, what was it in Syria? Whenever a few years ago when we were there, and they said that CNN played this clip of like, oh, this is the insurgents killing innocent people in Syria, and it showed a video. It was actually a gun range in like North Carolina.
Yeah,
and they buffed the video, and
it was in Kentucky. I think.
Kentucky,
I
Kentucky.
that one.
And so I mean, like, and that stuff still exists today, and those things still happen. And it's just, I'm not discounting anything that's happening in Ukraine, but it's just like to see the full picture or the true story. It's like you have to be there.
It's hard to know.
Right.
I think there's enough of the narrative there to.
No, I believe that it's not one of those like, oh, I don't know, man.
This-
No, like
yeah,
I believe there's war happening, and I believe that innocent people
I'm
are
just saying,
dying.
and to the extent where I don't think we'll truly ever know, because it's so hard to tell what is real and what's not, especially on the internet and from if you're getting your information from these news corporations, is what I'm saying. Even TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, like they filter, they you know what I'm saying? When you get all your information from these types of organizations, they have a narrative that they want you to see.
Even YouTube.
We
might get, if we're not on par with their narrative, this video will get pulled down.
Exactly. So that also makes it hard to understand what's truly going on over there.
yeah, but how you have to solve that problem, Paul, is you have to figure out who are the news sources you can rely on and pay attention to them. And I recall that we talked about in one previous podcast about there's a chart that shows which media is left, which media is right, and which media is in the center. And this is evaluated, the opinions on where the media outlets sit is given by polls of people. It's not, it's legitimate. People vote on, well, CNN is more left and Fox is more right and stuff like that. And those opinions change, they redo it every year. And you should have at least one or two news sources that are considered in the middle, centrist. And there's more, to me, more broadcast media that is reasonable than stuff on like Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that. There are so many crazy people. I mean, because they have access. I mean, you and I can't get on NBC News and make up a story, but we can get on Facebook and make up a story.
But NBC News can make up their own story.
Yeah.
Well, right, they can. But the point is, you have to find multiple resources for news and put them together and decide what the consensus is.
I think that's the real answer, which we've said before, is go to multiple sources, even sources that you do not agree with or like, and try to get the best version. You'll never have the full truth, but try to get the best version you can of what makes sense and what doesn't seem like bullshit.
Or you could have some litigation that maybe puts a little bit more pressure.
Yeah, you're getting into some other.
Yeah,
there's a whole bunch of routes we could go down.
Yeah, that's branching out into something else.
What happens if Ukraine fails and Russia succeeds and what it is that they want to do and they take over? What happens then?
Good question.
Well, that's what everybody's wondering. First of all, it becomes an insurgency. So theoretically, Russia will never be successful there because the Ukrainians will wear them down and make them leave like Afghanistan.
Invading countries doesn't work. It's been proven time and time again.
Now, the fear of NATO is that if Russia wins in Ukraine, then they're going to keep going. And keep going means attack somebody that's in NATO.
Or go for Poland or any of these places that took refugees or...
Well, the former Soviet republics like Latvia, those are all in NATO. So it's unknown what's going to happen. Maybe, the sanctions are very powerful. Maybe Putin will fall because their economy will collapse. And all the power brokers that he works with will decide they've had enough.
So
they've lost too much money.
So two quick questions to that statement. So in light of the sanctions, obviously Russia was an export of 40% of America's oil, if I'm not mistaken, at least from what I heard.
8%. We import 8% of our oil from there.
Okay.
Which we stopped.
Right. And then you had major credit card companies like Visa and MasterCard stop allowing transactions from Russia or however that works.
It's been a whole bunch of them, man. McDonald's, Starbucks, all these companies being like, we're not involved.
Coca-Cola didn't, by the way, if you want to quit buying Coca-Cola.
Oh.
So Russia's eventually, they're going to do, he's going to do something, right? And I know that there have been talks with China and creating their own type of credit system or whatever, what have you. So, I don't think that he could go broke in that sense. To where he couldn't continue. But I guess what my second question would be, and if you want to answer both, that's fine. You don't have to. You can go with the second question. I know, with you observing Rome and seeing how they fell, or just seeing empires build themselves, if that's what Russia's trying to do and they do take over Ukraine, and like you said, he'd want to do more, what instances in history have you seen things like this happen before? And how successful was it? I know there have been some pretty big empires, but I guess what I'm asking is, could an empire succeed and thrive in today's type of environment?
It's hard to answer, Paul, because the world today is mostly democracies. And this is the only time in history that's ever been like that. From the time of Mesopotamia, which is like 3,500 BC, until like 1850, the world was run by kings and queens. There were monarchies, which are basically dictatorships. There were no democracies until the Enlightenment. So, and the kings and queens fought each other. France fought England, and England fought Germany, and Germany fought Italy, and all that, because it was all about power, accumulating power. It was the same thing as Putin, basically. So it repeats. I think it's repeated itself cyclically throughout history. This is a little different now because of the democracy thing, because that's why all the countries of the West have united about the sanctions. Everybody got on board real quick because they see it all as a threat to freedom.
So what I don't like about what I agree with the sanctions, but what I don't agree with is the fact that now all the politicians or all of the left leaning politicians or whatever, or even Biden for this sake, is saying that the recent insurgent or the reason I cannot talk. The reason gas prices are so high is because of what's happening in Russia, and I don't necessarily agree with blaming when this has been going on, even before the war. You know what I'm saying? I know that this is a hot topic.
We can have a whole conversation.
Yeah.
That's a different podcast.
That's a strategy he has to use because it's mostly gone up before the war.
Right.
So I mean, he's trying to use it as a cover story for inflation.
Yeah, it's very true, which is a different podcast. So, sorry, real quick. So if it ends up being, so let's say that, Ukraine falls, Russia gets it. Does this entice China to take over Taiwan? Because I feel like that's an inevitable when they're going to eventually.
Everybody keeps talking about that. It's hard to know. Maybe China is now less interested in taking over Taiwan because they see the sanctions against Russia. Maybe they don't want that. I mean, Putin is basically a pariah in the world. Everybody in the world hates him except Cuba, China, and North Korea. I mean, what kind of position is that, to enjoy?
But you're right. Even China's probably smart enough to realize like they have to outweigh the pros versus cons, and they're like, hey, look what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. And if we tried to take over Taiwan and all these sanctions hit us and all this different stuff happens and our economy falls, is what we would be gaining by having Taiwan even worth it?
This is what I've said before in previous times, is that there probably won't be another World War III because we are so connected globally and like for these kind of reasons. So I want to ask your opinion on this, Mike, whether or not this will, do you think it's going to expand, or do you have what my opinion is to where for those kind of reasons, because other countries can see this, how interconnected we are, everybody's reliant on everybody else. Nobody's independent. It's actually a really beautiful thing because that's how humans are. Nobody's self-made or anything like that.
There's not enough resources in China.
Everybody relies on other human beings to survive, and it's kind of just, I know it's my hippie moment.
No, that's right though.
For the night, but everybody's interconnected. Everybody relies on everybody else. Nobody's self-made. That this will prevent that, and because we're so globally connected, we've only become more connected throughout time. That there won't be yes, what's happening is terrible. The war that's happening between Ukraine and Russia is terrible, but it won't end up being another World War III.
Well, it depends on whether Putin's crazy or not.
Which he's obviously insane.
Right.
But to what degree?
But yeah, exactly. But to what degree?
Right. If he's fanatical, I mean, this reminds me so much of Hitler because Hitler did the same thing.
No, it very much has that feel. It very much has that feel to it.
So something I've never understood, and I'm kind of digressing a little bit from the podcast, or from the main topic, but something that I've never understood, and it's probably got to deal with brainwashing and nationalism and patriotism and stuff. But why is it that militaries don't just turn around and say no? With what happened with Hitler and with what's happening right now with Putin, do you reach a breaking point where it backfires and Russia says, no, this isn't happening, and overthrows him? Why does he have the full military support? Why are there not people in the military, high up people in the military, generals, whatever, being like, no, we can't do this? Is there not people with a soul? This is more of a rhetorical question because I don't think it can be answered.
It's even interesting in the way that you word it, which I find funny, because we're not saying country. We're not saying Russia's like Russia so much. It's Putin. It's one individual. It's not the United States is going to Afghan. It's very much just this one individual, which he's probably just the face to the whole thing.
So a group of individuals.
We don't even recognize him representing Russia almost so much. It's just this one.
There's plenty of Russian people against him.
Yeah, there's this one mad individual that's doing all this. It's not a country that's doing this.
Right.
It's a weird thing. Weird thing.
Yeah, that's all I had on it, though. Like I said, it was kind of rhetorical because
No,
I don't think
agree.
it has an answer.
That's always boggled me too, Mike. And I think Johnny was asking if you had any type of throughout human history, people they always follow. Like a majority of people are followers, and whatever instructions they have, like they're going to be order followers. I mean, we're sheep in a sense to where we're just going to we're going to go into the slaughterhouse.
Nationalism and patriotism brainwashing is pretty strong, and I know that there's some people out there who are going to take that the wrong way because of America. But I mean, I'm not talking about there is that in America as well. Do not get me wrong, but that's not what I'm talking. I just mean a general statement for anywhere in the world. The power of nationalism and patriot pride can be a detriment at some points when it goes too far.
Well, it did in Germany. That's
exactly.
Right. But I mean, when you go in the military, like if you're going to be a Marine, when you graduate as a Marine, you're very patriotic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's instilled in you, and the people that go through that are selected out. So, I mean, those are the people. They're not going to turn. I mean, sometimes I think about would the U.S. military ever turn on the administration, on the government? And we have a very passive military in that sense that they follow orders.
This sounds so bad, and I'm not insulting the troops in any way, so don't take this the wrong way. But I would say that they do a good job of weeding out the critical thinkers who are thinking in that way. And I don't want to say that there's not critical thinkers in the military. I don't mean it like that. But
they're
I think
in the Air Force. They're sitting back behind computers.
Air Force is part of the military. Thank you.
I know, but not like frontline. What you're talking about is like frontline.
Not even just frontline, just everything. I think that as you try to progress, it'd be like if you were to try to get into politics, Paul. If you were a good moral person with values and tried to move up through politics, they would weed you out and you would not be able to move up.
Right.
And I think that probably that same thing, this is all just grain of salt, just talking out of my ass right now. But I think that probably happens as well with the military when there's no people in the higher up places of power in the military that have those thoughts of, hey, maybe this isn't the right thing.
It's got to be. I mean, I feel like there are people out there, but majority.
I mean, Hitler's generals tried to kill him more than once. And it's because they felt he was going to destroy Germany. And they weren't willing to put up with that. But unfortunately, they failed.
Do you think Putin lives throughout this whole thing? Like he actually makes... Because obviously, like how I see it, if I had to predict it, eventually you'd have to go to court. What's that called? What's the court called?
The World Court. It's in the Netherlands.
Okay. Right. Yeah, neutral spot. That makes sense. I thought it was called something. What was where the Germans got tried?
You're talking about the Nuremberg trials.
Yeah, the Nuremberg. There you go. That's what I was trying to think of. But I don't even see him making it to even like trial.
War crimes and that kind of stuff.
I don't even think he gets tried.
He could be put on trial if he's not there.
Yeah, but
too.
Well, that's true because the whole thing needs to get resolved because the world wants answers or retribution or whatever. I'm probably saying wrong words with that. But no, I don't even see him making it to that. He either does what Hitler did and he takes his own life at some point or he gets taken out. I don't see it. You know, I get it. He's KGB and he knows how to, survive, which is, going through that process. He's also taken out a bunch of people too. So he knows the process. That guy, I'm sure he has a food taster every time he sits down.
It's not like he's
an
idiot. The guy is obviously a smart guy. When you're talking purely
he's not stupid. When it comes to actually really bad things, he's intelligent at, which no human being should be. I wouldn't want to live his life. I wouldn't want that.
You couldn't. You have a moral code that you live by.
Yeah, but anyway, my prediction is he doesn't even make it to any kind of like Nuremberg style trial. Like he either takes his own life or this guy's taken out within, I'd give it like 6 months. That's my prediction on the whole thing.
He'll never be in court, most likely. So you're right about that. I don't know how long he can last. It depends on the impact of the economic sanctions and hitting the country hard enough that people in power there decide they want to stop that. Because we're laying it out in the news. Hey, if you stop the war, we'll stop the sanctions. That's why the sanctions are there, to get him to stop.
Another thing that you have to think about, and I just mean this to the general American public, is that everything we're hearing, I don't know for a fact, but I can almost guarantee you that is not what is being talked about in Russia. You know what I mean? Like there's like we have our own propaganda that's fed to us. They have their level of propaganda. So, you know, we're like, you can't ask the question like that I literally asked earlier of why don't Russians just turn around and fight against him? Well, because what they're being fed is different than what we see. Like you mentioned earlier about the whole Ukraine welcoming them with open arms and talking about how, oh, Ukraine attacked us first and all that. Like the propaganda is there for, I don't even know. I can't say any more on that, if that makes sense. Like,
well, they don't have an open society and they don't have a free press. So only the government has the news.
That's what I'm saying. They get to write the story. Like the government gets to say what is happening.
But they're still labeled as a democracy, though, right?
No.
Because I thought Putin got voted in, like putting
Yeah,
quotation
he got
marks.
like 90% of the vote, but it's all rigged.
But that's what I'm saying. So I'm
saying on paper, what are they actually?
No, on paper, I'm pretty sure they're still a republic. Are they a republic on paper?
Don't know the answer to that. I mean, the closest thing they are to is not a government type, but it's basically a gangster.
I think on paper.
I'm just curious what they're.
I'm going to look it up. I'm pretty sure on paper they are a democratic socialist republic. I'm pretty sure that's what they are on like technical terms.
Okay, all right. Curious on that.
But that isn't really that.
Yeah, no, it's not real. It's not real.
No,
I'm just saying,
anything.
like on which is what I think you were asking is like, what are they on paper technically?
Yeah, I gave my prediction. I think Putin's not even meeting trial within 6 months, and this whole thing's done within like 6 months because of. Oh wait, this is what I wanted to say before I say that. This is what's also really sad is we view too much, not so much in loss of human life, which I know that these two are interconnected, but in this sounds poorly, but you attack them economically first, and it doesn't matter about like,
federal democratic republic is what they are on paper.
Okay,
Right.
This is what also bothers me is we view so much of like, man, attack an economy, and that's how you change shit between countries and warfare, and it's not about lives lost. And I'm like, this is so stupid. Where it's so money driven, like that's how you win a war. Like nowadays, it's coming in and you ruin their economy, you trash them, eventually you piss off the people who had more money than Putin, taking him out. Whatever it is, that's so stupid. It's like lives matter so much. Once again, the hippie coming out of me right now, who also believes that every person should.
Which is
exactly.
Hold up, but into your statement that lives matter is exactly the reason why it's actually a good thing that, like playing devil's advocate, it's a good thing that that's how people can be taken out is through economic means.
I was just going to say that because if you use economic sanctions to destroy an economy, you're not killing anybody. I mean,
people will die. People will die.
Yes, but you're not physically killing them.
Yeah, nowhere on the level of actual warfare.
But do you know what I mean? Like you're talking about numbers on a computer, and that's what does it out. But oh man, the lives lost here, like that didn't matter so much. It happened on this weird mathematical thing that a bunch of human beings have agreed on, that this is the math of what in resource-based things.
You know, it's kind of. I get what you're saying. It's kind of fucked.
No, that's all I wanted to get at. From that,
this stems to a good question right here. And is it like the World Economic Forum and the New World Order? Is that inevitable or is it necessary? Because if not, you'll continuously have war. And I'm not saying I want a New World Order or the Economic Forum to, by 2030 you'll own nothing and be happy type of shit. I'm not advocating
George
for that
Bush
in the least.
Sr.
Right,
Which we've kind of already got that going on.
But without a type of one world government, this is always going to happen, is it not?
Well, I'm very opposed to globalism, and I want to write one of my future books is going to be about it. What I'm opposed to is the fact that if you create one economy, let's say, that economy is not responsible to the people. Like right now, there are hundreds of organizations around the world, like the World Bank. The World Bank has a lot to do with how cash is moved around the world and who gets it and all that stuff. That's not regulated by anything. There's no SEC. It's not part of our country. So there's a term called NGO, non-government organization. There are thousands of them around the world that are involved with the economies of different countries. Many countries are connected between them, and they operate without control. And see, globalism, I mean, you guys know this, globalism is the cause of the loss of status of the middle class in the United States. Because when our corporations went global, they started hiring people in the countries where you could pay them the least money.
Mm-hmm.
And so we transferred all that labor around the world, and our people lost their jobs. So then that created, that's, Trump, the strongest Trump advocates are the people who feel disadvantaged, that their government doesn't do anything for them, and they are stuck with meaningless jobs, and they have no control over their lives. So they saw him as a savior and a solution to that.
Maybe that's why he got voted in, because I agreed with everything you said. I was not a Trump supporter, but I agree with everything you just said. But
see, the other thing is, I mean, Trump's philosophy was America first. And that can be an arrogant statement in the sense if you piss off everybody else and only do things for yourself. I mean, you have to deal with other people. You have to negotiate. You have to have relationship with other people. But when, they talk about one of the things, they accuse Trump of being they accuse him of being a dictatorial or authoritarian like Hitler or whatever. The thing about globalism, as I said, is that it removes control of laws and behavior from the society. So in America, we can control what our government does theoretically by voting. But nobody can control the World Bank except other corporations and rich people. So if the World Bank does something like kills people, nobody can do anything about it. So, Trump's, America First thing was to try and bring back the society and the country as a unit. We shouldn't be all devolving into a world government. We're Americans, and we should take care of America's problems. Just like the English should take care of their problems, and the French and the Germans and the Italians and all that.
So Mike, going off that, and I'm once again digressing just a little.
Something else.
I don't want to go too far. I'm going to be real brief with this, because I think we've done a good job of focusing on this, on Russia and Ukraine, because a lot of our podcasts kind of go off the rails and we talk about other stuff, and I don't want to rehash a million things we've talked about before. So trying to stay on topic, but briefly branching off, going by that logic of you just said, which I agree with, I 100% agree with, going by that logic of how globalism is bad and those kind of things, in the same way, couldn't you say that us as a nation, as America, being as big as we are, is just a smaller version of that? Like, the same rules apply. We are, take your outlook on globalism, pretend that the rest of the world doesn't matter, and we're already doing that with America. There are not enough state rights. There are not, we're too big. I keep saying that, and I know that some people agree, some people disagree, but when you take everything out of the picture and you just focus on America, we're already at that kind of globalist thing just with America. You can't control or get 370 million people. Exactly.
Narrowing the scope.
Zoom in the microscope a little bit. You can't 370 million is still too many for people to agree. You really need yeah, there's some economy things that has to be established. You
Bunch
want
of libertarians here, Mike. Man,
you want trade to trade to work between Missouri and Tennessee.
I don't agree with you in the fact that I agree in the fact that every country has their own type of globalism, if that's the way you want to look at it. But there are a lot of countries out there. And what Mike and I are saying is, if you boil that all into one, the world is one country.
Okay.
Like that's some deep shit.
Okay,
man.
what I'm saying, though, hold up,
terrible. That's the worst thing that could ever happen.
Hear me out real quick. For a moment, hypothetical, pretend that no other country exists in the world. It's just America, right?
Sure.
You're already at that. Now you just replace countries with states.
So we're not, though.
We are, though.
No, we're not.
We are like that as America.
But there's nothing wrong with wanting to be an American if
I'm not saying there's
real
anything wrong with wanting to be an American. I'm saying
I don't understand what you're saying, man. Because
dude,
there's so many countries.
Then let me finish talking.
I've heard it.
Following the exact same logic that both of you just used, a globalist thing is bad because you can't get everybody on the same page and it's unfair and there's not freedom in that. In the same sense, America is too big and you can't get everybody on the same page. You run into tribalism. You run into all these issues. States almost need to be like separate countries.
Yeah, no,
it's the same logic. It follows regardless of size.
I'm curious what you have to say about that.
Ooh, hot topic.
Well, I'm this is going on a sidebar, but I just have a couple comments. One is I agree that states have lost much of the power they had at the original founding of the country.
Absolutely.
Because the country has become centralized with this bloated, huge federal government.
Yeah.
States should have more control than they have had lately. Now, ironically, with tribalism is creating red and blue states. So it is giving them more power because the blue states are people, left-leaning people are moving to blue states and making them more blue, and red conservatives are moving to red states and making them more red. And I mean, if you look at the laws passed in red states versus blue states, they're very different. But the blue states are taxed very high taxes because they're more welfare, left-oriented services for people and all that. And the red states are more freedom, don't wear a mask and that kind of stuff. So in an ironic sense, the states are getting more powerful because of tribalism.
But we're still, and that makes sense, and I agree with that. We're still, on a federal level, though, we have federal rules to follow, which means that so you talk about the separate between there's blue states and there's red states, right? But right now we have a blue president. So technically blue rules over all of those right now. Red or blue states.
Not necessarily.
Blue, but
then you have
yes.
the Senate. That's why you have the checks and balances.
I guess. And once again, I get what I'm saying. The logic of you take the logic of globalism.
You can apply
and tone it down. The exact same logic applies. It's the same thing I mentioned a long time ago where I talked about there's a difference between 3 people living in a house
I know.
and 800 people living in a house.
I agree. No, I absolutely agree with you.
So it's just where do you draw that line?
Too much power.
The federal government definitely has too much power.
If you really get down to it, but once again, it's just like you have 3 libertarians sitting at a table right now. Of course, we're all going to agree on that. I feel like the federal government has too much power.
You have to have some type of unbiased counsel.
We're proud Missourians here.
I guess, I wasn't trying to start an argument. I actually wasn't even trying to start a discussion. I just appreciate what Mike said about globalism because it made me think of that in the same way for a federalism kind of thing because it's very similar. It follows the same lines.
There's another aspect to this that I'm sure you guys will agree with, and that is that globalism started when, and I think mostly American corporations, but Western Europe would be included, started opening up plants and services and hiring workers around the world. So they were the first globalists. When Procter & Gamble opened up in every country and Wendy's is in McDonald's are in every country, and that's the beginnings of globalism. And unfortunately, that influences our federal government. Mm-hmm. So our federal government does things to help the companies that are in our country.
Which in turn helps globalism.
Right. But we want our country or companies in Ukraine to do well. Mm-hmm. So that unfortunately, that's part of the reason why we take political stands on countries, and that's because we have economic interests aside from political interests.
And another frustration that I have is that's exactly it, is you're more worried about the company, the business, the money than actual people
who live in
think,
that country.
Yeah. I think that all of a sudden now you're getting off on some stupid stuff that I don't, call me a hippie or whatever, but I believe in people, and money is just a number. Like it
I'm
really,
right there with you, man.
really is on that, at least for me. That's what frustrates me.
Don't forget, ever since society began, which was about 4000 BC, when agriculture started, because we've talked about this, before agriculture, man was a nomadic species, moved from place to place to find food, blah, blah, blah. Small groups, 50 to 150 people. Then when agriculture started, you could grow crops in a very small area and feed large groups. So towns and cities formed, and societies formed, and land ownership made you wealthy, and people became powerful, and there's a social divide by wealth. And ever since then, some segment of every society pursues power and wealth because that's the way they think. And power and wealth always drives everything.
Mike, this is exactly,
it's a human behavior.
This is exactly why I love the podcast that you're on. Why I like having Mike on is because you put a different, not a spin, that's the wrong word. You don't put a different spin. You have a different outlook that makes me see stuff differently. It makes me better explain my own ideals of stuff, like you talking about 150 people and all this, and I'm thinking to myself, and man, I'm getting way out of the Russia and Ukraine thing, and I know we're running out of time, but it makes me think to myself, once again, like, do you need, like, man, name 150 people you know.
Can't do it.
Name 150 people that you, Jesse Westbrook, know.
No, I know like
so
12 people.
why do you need more than that? Why should there be someone ruling over 370 million people? Why should there be someone ruling over 3 million people? Why should there, like, I'm not saying we should go back to nomadic ways and all this, because that does cause, once again, more war between tribes and stuff like that. But in general, like, look out for your, like, I'm way branching off from Russia and Ukraine, so I'll close this up real quick.
That's fine.
Look out for the people you know. Obviously, give a shit about other people. But in general, like, your small circle, the internet has, like, broadened us out to everything that's in the world. But the truth is, I'm never going to meet the person in Ukraine. I'm not saying I don't care about them and that there shouldn't be war there, but I'm never going to meet them. They're not part of my, like, social circle. It doesn't mean that I think that bad things should happen to them. I'm just saying when it comes to, like, a governing force over us, I'm never going to meet Biden or Trump, and I have no desire to. I don't need to. What I want to be governed by is my city. And not even at that scale, but I'm okay with that. Yeah. I want the people around me to govern each other. You know, the local police force shouldn't be privatized and shouldn't be a corporation. It should be. I'm going to stop because I could go so much further.
You're really.
But you guys get what I'm saying, though, right? Like, I'm going to stop because that's a different podcast entirely.
But I'm going to try and summarize what you said, because I believe in the same thing very strongly. I think every person has to have two parts of their life: the kind of public part and the private part. Because when things happen in the public part that you don't like, you still have the private part.
Exactly.
And I use a ridiculous example. The Chiefs got beat by Cincinnati, and you guys are enormous Chief fans, and you were very upset and all that. But then you turn to your private part. You've got your family, you got your job, you got your friends and stuff. And that is more important, actually. And so if you have a strong private part, I always find myself, when a bad thing happens, like this war thing, I'm interested in what's happening and why it happened. And then I get tired of hearing about it because I understand it. And then it gets depressing because it's like awful. And I just think about my private part, my friends, and enjoying the private part, which you control and you're closer to, and is more, your life is about 80 to 90% your private part and 10% all this other junk, all the news and all that kind of stuff, because it doesn't influence you directly most of the time. So value their private part. And
I want to make so many sexual jokes right now.
I know.
I get what you're saying though, Mike.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. And that's
the personal part.
Yeah.
People- People
no.
lose sight of that. We truly do. And it's easy to lose sight of that with the type of environment that we're put into.
Yeah.
In the education
They
system
make
that
it they
we're a part
make
of,
it
yeah.
easy to lose sight of that.
Yeah. And that's what we forget. And I think the hippiness would come out of the majority of the population and satisfy Jesse's hippiness needs if we all didn't
we're an
lose sight. If we didn't-
aperture through which the universe is expressing itself.
Yeah.
Is what we all are, and you need to enjoy that portion of it.
Yeah.
You know,
100%. Well, we're kind of close to the end of the hour. Well, actually, I think we are. So I don't know if anyone has any lasting thoughts because we're about 10 p.m. our time. But it's been always a fun time to have you on, Mike. Well, we won't wait so long to do it again.
yeah, no, absolutely.
Like I said earlier, I love having
really
Mike
do.
on. I really like the conversations we have with Mike.
It's been a long
Let's
time, man.
Let's make a pact to do one when the war resolves.
Yes,
100%.
That'll be very, like 1 month, 2 months, whenever it is.
Yeah.
Where we can say, well, when we did our last podcast, we had all these questions about what would happen to Putin, what would happen to Ukraine. Then we'll know. And so we could talk about the history, looking back on it.
Ukrainians are free from that bullshit, and Putin's in the ground somewhere. I'll buy a bottle of champagne. I'll send you a bottle of champagne or something, man. We'll celebrate that day for sure.
All right.
Well, yeah, I'll definitely put in the links below where we can find all your books. I know that doesn't really apply. I mean, it does apply to the podcast, but we kind of didn't talk about really any of that. Again, it plays into what's happening right now. But anywho, I'm going to let people know who Mike Anderson is and where they can find you. You're still doing did you start your own podcast? You did.
I've done two, but
Okay.
I've been very busy and haven't done any more since.
Okay. Fair enough. So yeah, well, either way, like I said, people are going to be able to find you on Amazon, all that good stuff. Mike, thanks for joining Talk Junkies,
Okay.
man. It's always a pleasure to have you on.
All right. See you later.
See you, Mike.
Have a good night, Mike.
Love you, Mike.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
Yep.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Mike Anderson. Always a pleasure to have him on. I hope you guys really enjoyed the video. I don't know if you guys have any lasting thoughts, but a good podcast.
This got to get flagged, right? Like something had to have been
No,
said.
I
I don't
don't
think
to
so.
get
No,
flagged.
I don't think so.
I don't think so
Okay.
either.
I just never know with YouTube anymore. Like I don't know what I can and can't say.
There's going to be
That's
a
fair.
point where we're
Like-
not going to be on YouTube anymore, man. I'm about done with
like
with
it's
YouTube,
like it's
so.
weird. Like I can't be myself. Like I got to step on eggshells with
Yeah.
with a platform. About what I can say as an individual.
Well, there's
in
been
my
tons
opinions.
of stuff that I can't say in the past podcast.
So
that,
it's for another one. But
Yeah, there's going to be a point where we're not. I mean, we're getting more viewers through Anchor than we are on YouTube right now.
Was it-
So
was
that's
it-
through Apple Podcasts,
was it-
Spotify, all that stuff.
was it like 4 years ago whenever we had Mike Anderson on for the first time?
No,
with the
so-
first book?
3.
Our 4-year anniversary was last week, actually, or two weeks
Oh,
ago.
okay.
Yeah.
But so right around that, because Mike Anderson came on pretty quick after that.
He was our first guest.
Yeah, it was a solid like 6 months or so.
Yeah, when you and I did quite a few podcasts before we
It's
had a
coming up
guest
to
on.
it.
Yeah.
And
coming
then
up to it.
no, because you guys did like a solid 6 months of podcast,
Yeah, before we had
and
a
then
guest.
I came on.
No, we had Mike. Jesse and I had Mike Anderson on before you joined.
No, I was here for the first Mike
Oh
Anderson.
yeah,
podcast.
that's right. That's true. You're right. Yeah.
You guys did it for a solid 6 months.
Yeah.
Before I came on
Yeah.
as a regular,
Mm-hmm.
and then it was a couple of months after I was on
That we had
Mike on.
because he was our very first guest. Remember, I
okay.
texted you guys, said, "Hey man, I got this guy."
That's good.
Unless Crow was on before him, he might have been. I can't remember, but
No, we definitely had Mike Anderson on before.
I don't know.
I think Crow was our first, but
No.
either
Yeah.
way, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. It doesn't matter.
Anywho, if you guys like this video, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell notification, send it to every contact in your phone so your mom, your brother, your sister, your dad, your fucking grandpa, grandma, aunt, uncle see this video.
Paul's mom, she's probably in your phone. She's in mine.
Yeah, Wolflo, Bobby, Will, whoever's listening to this podcast, we always appreciate it as always. Looking for those comments.
Stay fly and ring the bell.
I love how you threw Jesse a loop ball, as always, and then he starts, and you're like looking for those comments.
No, I love Mike though.
I do too. Yeah.
It's always fun.